The conversation that follows strips away 5 years of careful professional construction. Ghost explains about her parents' death in Mumbai, about a 16-year-old girl's placement with a relative who turned out to be something other than what his official records suggested, about 2 years in the mountains learning that warfare is mathematics, that killing is philosophy, that precision is a form of prayer practiced by people who understand that every shot carries the weight of absolute consequence. Hawk listens without interruption, occasionally making notes, but mostly just absorbing the implications of having an officer whose tactical education came from one of the most legendary snipers in modern military history. When Ghost finishes, the silence stretches long enough for the air conditioning to cycle through 2 complete rotations. Jesus Christ, Khatri, do you have any idea what this means? Yes, ma'am. It means I'm probably the only person on this base who can think like our sniper thinks. And it means that if word gets out about my background, my career is effectively over. Hawk nods grimly. Military careers have been destroyed for far less dramatic security discrepancies than failing to report extensive training with an off-the-books special operations legend. The fact that Ghost was a minor at the time might provide some protection, but it wouldn't eliminate the questions about loyalty, foreign contacts, and the possibility of compromised security clearances. What do you recommend? Ghost has been preparing for this question since the first thing you notice about Captain Indira, Ghost, Khatri, isn't her slight frame or the way she moves through the hangar like smoke between machinery. It's the silence that follows her, not the uncomfortable kind that screams of social awkwardness, but the deliberate quiet of someone who has learned that words are ammunition, and ammunition shouldn't be wasted. The other pilots at Bagram Airfield call her the whisper behind her back, though none would dare say it to her face. Not out of respect, not yet, but because there's something unsettling about the way her dark eyes seem to calculate distances even in casual conversation. October 15, 2023. The briefing room buzzes with the usual pre-mission banter until Ghost enters. The laughter doesn't die completely, but it shifts, becomes forced. Major Rick Bulldozer Thompson, squadron leader and self-appointed king of the sky, barely glances up from his tablet. Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence. Hope you brought your lucky charm today, Khatri. Heard the Taliban's got some new toys. Ghost settles into the back row, her flight suit impeccable despite the early hour. She says nothing, but her fingers unconsciously trace a small scar on her left temple, a nervous habit that betrays the only crack in her otherwise perfect composure. The mission brief begins. A routine supply drop to Firebase Echo, 30 clicks northeast. Simple, clean, the kind of milk run that shouldn't require their best pilot, but Ghost volunteered anyway. She always volunteers. What Thompson and the others don't know, what Ghost has never told anyone, is that the scar on her temple isn't from her crash landing in Helmand Province 3 years ago, as her official record states. It's from a ricochet during a training session in the Hindu Kush Mountains, when she was 16 years old. The man who put that bullet there, intentionally, taught her that missing by millimeters was sometimes more valuable than hitting dead center. Fear keeps you sharp, Sergeant First Class Arjun Longshot, Maida had whispered as blood trickled down her face. But precision keeps you alive. Longshot Maida, legendary sniper, Ghost story made flesh. The man who officially died in a convoy bombing in 2018. The man who, in reality, spent his final years teaching a teenage girl from Mumbai that the sky could be conquered with the same patience and mathematical precision required to kill from impossible distances. Ghost learned to fly the way she learned to shoot, with her father figure's voice echoing in her mind, calculating wind speed, bullet drop, and the space between heartbeats where perfect shots live. The briefing ends. Engines roar to life across the tarmac. Ghost walks toward her A-10 Thunderbolt II, and for just a moment, her eyes drift toward the mountains where an old man once taught her that legends aren't born. They're forged one impossible shot at a time. The A-10's twin General Electric TF 34 engines spool up with their distinctive whine, a sound that makes seasoned infantry smile and enemies disappear into whatever holes they can find. Ghost runs through her pre-flight checklist with mechanical precision, each switch and gauge verified with the methodical attention of someone who understands that aircraft systems are just another form of weapons maintenance. Her hands move across controls worn smooth by countless pilots before her, but the way she touches each instrument suggests an intimacy that goes beyond training manuals. Warthog 27, radio check, crackles through her headset. Thompson's voice carries the easy confidence of someone who's never had to prove himself twice. 27, loud and clear, Ghost responds, her voice steady as mountain stone. She doesn't add the casual banter that peppers most radio communications. She never does. The formation taxi sequence begins with Bulldozer leading, his A-10 painted with nose art featuring a cartoon bulldozer crushing a tank. Behind him, Lieutenant Marcus, hotshot, Jenkins flies wing in an aircraft decorated with flames and a provocative pin-up girl. Ghost's plane bears no such adornments. The only marking beyond standard military stencils is a small, almost invisible notation near the cockpit. LM 1968, painted in letters so small they're barely visible unless you know where to look. Longshot Maida, born 1968. Her private memorial to a man the military believes died in a fireball en route Tampa, but who actually died in his sleep 2 years later in a small house outside Srinagar, holding the hand of the girl he trained to see the world through a sniper's scope. The girl who learned that every target has a story, every shot carries weight, and every trigger pull is a conversation with death that requires both respect and absolute commitment. As they lift off into Afghanistan's crystalline morning air, Ghost feels the familiar weight of responsibility settling across her shoulders, not just for the mission or for the supplies they're carrying to soldiers who depend on them, but for something larger, something her squadron mates wouldn't understand, even if she tried to explain it. The weight of carrying forward a legacy that officially never existed. 2-7, maintain standard formation. Thompson's voice carries a subtle condescension, as if he's reminding a child not to wander too far from the group. Ghost acknowledges with a simple Roger, but her eyes are already scanning the landscape below, reading terrain features the way Longshot taught her to read wind patterns and atmospheric conditions. Every ridge line is a potential hide site, every valley a natural funnel, every shadow a place where patient enemies wait for pilots who fly predictable patterns at predictable altitudes. The sun climbs higher, and somewhere below, men with old rifles and older grudges adjust their sights. 23 minutes into the flight, Ghost notices what the others miss. It's not anything dramatic, no missile locks or emergency radio chatter, just a subtle wrongness in the landscape below, like a photograph where someone has moved a single piece of furniture. A shepherd's hut that wasn't in yesterday's reconnaissance photos. Goats clustered in a pattern that suggests they're avoiding something rather than grazing naturally. And most telling, the complete absence of civilian foot traffic on a road that should be busy with morning commerce. Warthog lead 2-7. Recommend we adjust approach vector, seeing some anomalous ground activity near Waypoint Delta. Thompson's response comes back with barely concealed irritation. 2-7, maintain current heading. We're on schedule and Firebase Echo is expecting us. I don't see anything unusual down there. Ghost's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. This is the moment every competent pilot dreads, when experience conflicts with rank, when what you know is right runs headlong into what you're ordered to do. She could push back, could use her credentials as a former intelligence analyst to justify her concerns. But Ghost learned long ago that some battles are won through patience rather than confrontation. Roger lead, maintaining heading. The words taste like copper in her mouth. What Ghost doesn't share over the radio is what her trained eye is actually seeing. The shepherd's hut is positioned with military precision, offering clear fields of fire over the approach route to Firebase Echo. The GOAT pattern isn't random avoidance. It's the systematic movement of animals that have been trained to clear specific areas on command. And the empty road isn't empty because of random circumstance. It's empty because someone with authority has cleared it, creating a sterile environment where anything that moves can be clearly identified and targeted. Longshot Maida's voice whispers in her memory. The enemy's greatest weapon isn't their rifle, Beta. It's your assumption that they're stupid. He taught her to read landscapes like sheet music, to understand that human behavior follows patterns as predictable as bullet trajectories. The absence of normal activity is often more significant than the presence of obvious threats. Ghost's hands remain steady on the controls, but her mind races through calculations. Wind speed, approach angles, maximum effective range of commonly available weapons. The mathematics of death that Longshot drilled into her during countless hours in the mountains above Srinagar. She'd been 15 when he first explained how battles are won in the quiet moments before anyone starts shooting, when preparation meets opportunity and experience whispers warnings that pride refuses to hear. The formation continues its steady approach toward Firebase Echo, 3 A-10s carrying supplies and ammunition to soldiers who trust their pilots to deliver both safely. Behind them, the morning sun transforms the Hindu Kush into a wall of gold and shadow. Ahead, the firebase sits like a concrete island in a sea of hostile terrain. And below, patient men with patient rifles wait for American pilots to fly exactly where American pilots always fly, at exactly the altitude American pilots prefer, following exactly the approach pattern that hasn't changed in 18 months of routine supply runs. The first shot comes at 9:47 hours, local time. Not the wild spray of automatic weapons that characterizes most Taliban ambushes, but a single, precise crack that splits the morning air like a judge's gavel. Ghost sees the muzzle flash, a tiny orange blossom against the brown hillside, before she hears Thompson's grunt of surprise over the radio. Taking fire, Warthog lead is hit. But Ghost is already moving, her aircraft banking hard left while her eyes track the shooter's position. Not the obvious hide site near the shepherd's hut that had caught her attention, but a secondary position 300 meters east, perfectly positioned to catch aircraft after they've reacted to the primary threat. Classic Overwatch tactics. Longshot's voice echoes in her memory. Amateur snipers shoot at what they can see. Professional snipers shoot at what you'll show them. Thompson's A-10 streams hydraulic fluid and what might be fuel, but the Thunderbolt's legendary durability keeps it flying. Lead, what's your status? Hotshot's voice carries the high-pitched tension of someone experiencing their first taste of precision enemy fire. I can fly, but I'm losing systems. 2-7, can you identify the shooter? Ghost's response is clinical, economical. Grid 41 RQR 23,459, 67,832. Single shooter, elevated position, approximately 400 meters from your 6 o'clock. Recommend immediate evasive action and abort approach. Negative on abort. Echo Base needs these supplies. Jenkins, you're with me. 2-7, provide overwatch. The dismissal stings, but Ghost doesn't have time for wounded pride. She's already calculating angles, wind speed, and the ballistic properties of her GAU-8 Avenger cannon. The 30 rounds might seem like overkill for a single sniper, but Ghost knows something her squadron mates don't. She's not dealing with an ordinary Taliban fighter. The precision of that first shot, the patience required to let the lead aircraft pass before engaging, the discipline to fire just once before repositioning. These are the hallmarks of professional military training. As Thompson and Jenkins begin their approach to Firebase Echo, Ghost climbs to a higher altitude and begins a wide circle that will bring her cannon to bear on the sniper's position. Through her targeting system, she can see the landscape the way Longshot taught her to see it. Not as terrain, but as a three-dimensional chess board where every move has consequences, and every position offers both opportunities and vulnerabilities. The second shot takes Jenkins in the engine nacelle, sending his A-10 into a violent yaw that only his exceptional piloting skills prevent from becoming a death spiral. Warthog 3 is hit. Jesus, where is this guy? Ghost's voice cuts through the radio chatter like a blade. All Warthogs, immediate left turn, climb to Angels 15. Do not repeat, do not follow predictable evasion patterns. You're dealing with a professional. For the first time since takeoff, Thompson's voice carries genuine concern rather than condescension. 2-7, how do you know that? The answer dies in Ghost's throat. Because an old man in the mountains taught me to think like he does. Because I learned to kill from someone who understood that every shot tells a story, and this story is being written by someone who learned from the same textbook. Instead, she says, trust me, lead. This isn't random fire. The third shot never comes. Instead, Ghost watches through her targeting pod as a figure emerges from the sniper's hide, not running in panic, but moving with the measured confidence of someone executing a predetermined withdrawal plan. The figure pauses for exactly 3 seconds at the top of a ridge, long enough to be clearly visible through aircraft optics, before disappearing into the maze of caves and crevices that honeycomb the mountainside. Those 3 seconds tell Ghost everything she needs to know. The pause wasn't accidental. It was a message. A calling card left by someone who wanted to be seen, who wanted his opponents to know they were dealing with a professional. Longshot used to do the same thing during training exercises, revealing himself just long enough to remind his students that concealment wasn't about being invisible. It was about choosing when and where to be seen. Warthog lead 2-7. Target has withdrawn. Area appears clear for approach. Thompson's A-10 limps toward Firebase Echo, trailing vapor and uncertainty. Jenkins flies tight formation, his own aircraft wounded but flyable, and Ghost maintains overwatch, her eyes continuously scanning for threats that her experience suggests are no longer there. Professional snipers don't repeat the same ambush twice from the same position. They achieve their objective, in this case, demonstrating that American supply routes are vulnerable, and then they disappear to fight another day. The supply drop proceeds without further incident, but the atmosphere over the radio has changed. The easy camaraderie that characterized the morning's takeoff has been replaced by the sharp attention that comes when professionals realize they're facing other professionals. Questions hang in the air like contrails. Who was that shooter? How did he know their approach route? And why did Captain Khatri seem to understand his tactics so completely? As they form up for the return flight to Bagram, Thompson's voice crackles through Ghost's headset with uncharacteristic thoughtfulness. 2-7, good call on the evasive maneuvers. You probably saved our asses back there. It's the first time in 18 months that Major Thompson has acknowledged Ghost's tactical expertise without qualification or condescension. The recognition should feel good. It should feel like validation for years of being underestimated, dismissed, treated as a curiosity rather than a colleague. Instead, it feels like the weight of carrying secrets that grow heavier with each passing year. Because somewhere in those mountains, a sniper who learned from the same teacher she did has just announced his presence. And Ghost knows, with the certainty that comes from understanding how legends think and move and kill, that this morning's ambush was just the opening move in a much larger game. The flight home passes in unusual silence, each pilot lost in their own thoughts about precision and vulnerability, and the thin line between professional competence and professional death. That evening, Ghost sits alone in the officers' club, nursing a cup of tea that has long since gone cold. The celebration around her is muted. Thompson and Jenkins are alive. The supplies were delivered, and the mission was technically successful. But victories that depend on luck rather than skill leave a bitter aftertaste, especially for pilots who understand how easily luck can change sides. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Hawk Morrison, squadron commander and the only other woman in the unit, slides into the chair across from Ghost. Hawk earned her call sign the hard way, flying close air support missions in Iraq where split-second decisions meant the difference between protecting friendly forces and becoming a friendly fire statistic. She's one of the few people at Bagram who treats Ghost as a peer rather than an oddity. "Hell of a thing today," Hawk says, her voice carrying the particular weariness that comes from commanding people through situations where competence and luck intersect in unpredictable ways. "Thompson says you called the evasive maneuvers like you knew exactly what that sniper was thinking." Ghost's fingers find the small scar on her temple again, tracing the thin line that connects her to memories she's never shared with anyone wearing the same uniform. "Experience, ma'am. Pattern recognition." What kind of experience teaches a pilot to think like a sniper? The question hangs between them like smoke from a distant fire. Ghost could deflect, could offer the sanitized version of her background that appears in her official files. Daughter of Indian immigrants, MIT engineering graduate, exceptional pilot with an uncanny tactical sense. All true, but none of it explaining why she could read the sniper's intentions like a familiar book. Instead, she offers a fragment of truth. "I spent some time in Kashmir before joining up, learned to see terrain the way infantry sees it, the way snipers see it." It's not exactly a lie, but it's not the whole truth either. Kashmir, yes, but not as a tourist or even as a civilian contractor. As a 16-year-old girl whose American parents had been killed in a terrorist bombing in Mumbai, taken in by an old soldier who saw something in her grief that reminded him of his own. Longshot Maida found her in a refugee camp, angry and brilliant and absolutely lost. He gave her purpose, taught her that precision could be a form of meditation, that understanding violence was the first step toward controlling it. Hawk nods slowly, accepting the partial explanation. "Well, whatever you learned over there, it saved lives today. Thompson's finally starting to understand what some of us have known for a while. You're not just another pilot filling a quota." The comment stings more than it should, because it acknowledges something Ghost has pretended doesn't bother her. The whispered conversations that stop when she enters a room. The assumption that her commission is more about political correctness than competence. The subtle but persistent suggestion that she doesn't quite belong in a world where trust is earned through shared danger and proven skill. "Ma'am, with respect, I've never asked for special consideration." "No," Hawk agrees, "you haven't, which is part of why you've earned it." The intelligence briefing the next morning brings news that surprises no one except the intelligence officers delivering it. 3 more supply convoys have been hit by precision rifle fire in the past week. No random spray of bullets, no improvised explosive devices, no suicide attacks. Just single, carefully placed shots that disable vehicles without causing unnecessary casualties. The hallmark of someone who understands that the goal isn't maximum death, but maximum disruption. Pattern suggests a single shooter or a very small team with advanced training. Lieutenant Amanda Chen, the base intelligence analyst, explains to a room full of pilots and ground commanders. Engagement ranges between 400 and 600 meters. No repeat attacks from the same position. Clean withdrawals with no evidence left behind. Ghost sits in the back row again, but this time the silence around her feels different. Less dismissive, more expectant. Word has spread about yesterday's encounter, about her ability to predict the sniper's tactics. She's become the unofficial expert on an enemy none of them understand. Major Thompson raises his hand. "Any idea who we're dealing with? Foreign fighter, Taliban with special training?" "Unknown at this time," Chen responds. "But the skill level suggests military training at the highest levels, possibly special operations background." Ghost's blood runs cold. She knows exactly what Chen means because she's seen this level of precision before. Not in combat, but in training. In the mountains above Srinagar, where an old man with patient eyes and steady hands taught her that true marksmanship wasn't about the gun, It was about understanding time and distance, and the space between heartbeats where perfect shots live. The possibility that has been lurking at the edges of her consciousness since yesterday's ambush suddenly crystallizes into terrible certainty. She knows this shooter, not personally, but professionally. Someone trained by Longshot Meta, or trained by someone Longshot trained. The family tree of legendary snipers is smaller than most people realize, and the techniques she witnessed yesterday carry fingerprints she recognizes. After the briefing, Ghost walks directly to the base's intelligence section. She's never voluntarily entered this world of classified files and compartmentalized secrets, but some knowledge is too dangerous to keep private. Lieutenant Chen looks up from her computer with surprised recognition. Captain Khatri, what can I do for you? I need to see everything you have on a Sergeant First Class Arjun Mehta. Last assignment was with the 3rd Special Forces Group before his death in 2018. Chen's fingers pause over her keyboard. That's an unusual request. May I ask why? Ghost meets her eyes with the steady gaze that has unnerved superior officers for years. Because I think our sniper learned from the same person I did. And if I'm right, we're dealing with someone much more dangerous than your briefing suggested. The weight of revelation settles between them like mountain snow, cold, persistent, and impossible to ignore. In the distance, helicopter rotors beat against afternoon air, carrying supplies and personnel to outposts where American soldiers trust that their supply lines will remain open, their patterns unpredictable, their enemies manageable. None of them know that the game has changed, that patience and precision have replaced chaos and volume as the enemy's primary weapons. The classified file on Sergeant First Class Arjun Longshot Mehta contains exactly what Ghost expected. Official records that end with his death in a convoy bombing near Kandahar, posthumous decorations for valor, and a service record sanitized of anything that might compromise ongoing operations. What the file doesn't contain is any mention of the 2 years he spent training irregular forces in Kashmir, or the teenage girl who became his most gifted student. Lieutenant Chen studies the documents with the focused attention of an intelligence analyst who has learned not to trust official narratives. Mehta was legendary, even by special operations standards. Confirmed kills at ranges most snipers consider impossible. But he died 5 years ago, Captain. What does this have to do with our current problem? Ghost closes the file and meets Chen's questioning gaze. Longshot didn't just teach marksmanship. He taught a philosophy: patience over aggression, precision over volume, the idea that one perfect shot at the right moment is worth more than 100 rounds fired in anger. You're suggesting our sniper was trained by someone who learned from Mehta. I'm suggesting our sniper is applying techniques that I recognize, techniques that aren't taught in any official military program. Ghost pauses, weighing how much truth she can reveal without compromising herself. I spent time in Kashmir during the insurgency. I saw how Longshot's methods influenced local fighters. The discipline, the tactical patience, the understanding that warfare is as much psychological as physical. Chen nods slowly, processing implications that extend beyond simple enemy capabilities. If you're right, we're not dealing with conventional Taliban tactics. This is someone who understands how American forces think, how we operate, how we respond to threats. Exactly. And that makes him infinitely more dangerous than anything in your briefing suggested. The next 48 hours prove Ghost's assessment correct in ways that no one could have anticipated. The precision attacks continue, but now they follow a pattern that reveals sophisticated intelligence gathering. Supply routes are hit only when they carry critical materials. Patrol schedules are anticipated with uncanny accuracy. Even random security changes seem to be predicted and countered. Most disturbing of all, the attacks begin to feel personal. Not the random violence of insurgent warfare, but the calculated moves of someone playing chess with human lives. Each engagement reveals just enough enemy capability to be concerning without providing enough information for effective countermeasures. Ghost finds herself studying maps of the surrounding terrain with the intensity she once brought to ballistics calculations. She's looking for something her colleagues can't see: the signature of a mind trained to think in terms of overlapping fields of fire, natural hide sites, and the mathematical relationships between cover, concealment, and killing zones. On the third night, she finds it: a pattern within the pattern, a logical sequence that connects all the attack sites through lines of sight and withdrawal routes that speak of extraordinary tactical sophistication. The sniper isn't just picking targets randomly. He's creating a web of control that makes American movement increasingly predictable and therefore vulnerable. Ghost stares at the map until her eyes burn, tracing imaginary bullet trajectories across terrain she studied from the air but never walked on foot. Somewhere in those mountains, a student of longshot meta is demonstrating that the old man's teachings have found fertile ground in unexpected places. The breakthrough comes not from intelligence gathering or tactical analysis, but from memory. Ghost is reviewing gun camera footage from yesterday's supply run when she notices something that makes her blood freeze. In the corner of one frame, barely visible through the A-10's targeting pod, a figure stands on a distant ridge. Not hiding, not running, just standing. Watching. The same deliberate exposure she witnessed during the first ambush. But this time, Ghost can see enough detail to matter. The figure is tall, lean, holding what appears to be a Dragunov sniper rifle, a weapon that requires significant training to use effectively at extreme ranges. More importantly, the way he holds it, the stance he adopts, even the angle of his body relative to the terrain, all speak of training she recognizes. Ghost enhances the image until pixels dissolve into meaningless blocks of color, but she doesn't need photographic clarity to understand what she's seeing. She's looking at someone who learned from the same textbook she did, someone who absorbed not just Longshot's technical skills, but his philosophical approach to warfare as meditation, violence as mathematics, killing as a form of precision engineering. The realization forces a decision Ghost has been avoiding since this crisis began. She can continue to advise from the sidelines, offering tactical suggestions based on her experience in Kashmir. Or she can acknowledge what she knows and accept the consequences of that knowledge. That evening, she requests a private meeting with Lieutenant Colonel Morrison. Hawk's office reflects her reputation: sparse, functional, dominated by maps and mission planning documents. The kind of space occupied by someone who understands that leadership is about making hard decisions with incomplete information. "Ma'am, I believe I can identify our sniper problem." Hawk looks up from a stack of after-action reports, her expression shifting from administrative distraction to sharp attention. "Go on." Ghost takes a breath that tastes like the mountain air of her childhood, when an old soldier taught her that truth was more important than comfort, even when truth carried personal risk. "I think we're dealing with someone trained by Sergeant First Class Arjun Mehta. Not directly, Longshot died 5 years ago, but someone who learned his methods, either from him personally or from another student." "And you know this how?" The moment of truth arrives with the weight of falling snow. Ghost could continue the careful deception, maintain the story about her time in Kashmir that explains her tactical insights without revealing their true source. It would be safer, more comfortable, and completely inadequate for the crisis they're facing. "Because Longshot Mehta trained me, ma'am, for 2 years, from the time I was 16 until I was 18. Everything I know about tactical thinking, about reading terrain, about understanding how snipers operate, I learned from him." The silence that follows is profound. Hawk sets down her pen and studies Ghost with the calculating attention of a commander, reevaluating everything she thought she knew about one of her officers. Outside the window, the base's evening routine continues: aircraft maintenance, perimeter patrols, The mundane business of keeping a military installation operational in hostile territory. That's not in your file, Hawk says finally. No, ma'am, it's not.